What's up, Heat fans? This is the Heat Report by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and we are doing something a little different in today's episode. Rather than a quick little 10-12 minute video discussing the latest around your Miami Heat, we are going to dive deeper in to what is happening around the Heat in the 305. So this might be a little bit of a longer video, but bear with me. I just want to experiment if I did more of a podcast style. Would you guys enjoy it? I am in my apartment late on a Saturday night grinding away, bringing you everything that you need to know about your Miami Heat, so make sure you do hit that sub button. But there's a bunch of topics that I want to get through on today's episode, really, and it starts obviously with Damian Lillard, but then I want to work my way into what the Heat have as their assets as a total, what would be my trade package to the Portland Trail Blazers for Damian Lillard. Is it worth it? I'm then going to talk about what players could the Heat target in the trade market, in free agency, if they do pull off a Damian Lillard trade, because they would have a lot of roster spots. And then to close out today's show, if you are a real one and stay possibly the 20 to 30 minutes that this is, we're going to talk a little bit about Anthony Edwards as well, because there's a lot of buzz surrounding him, the Miami Heat, and head coach Erik Spoelstra, while they are both together overseas playing for Team USA. But let's just jump right into it about Damian Lillard. And a lot of people are asking themselves, is a trade actually going to happen? And I'm honestly, as time goes on, getting more and more skeptical about if it's possible, if the Blazers are going to send him anywhere, because to this point, the Portland Trail Blazers, Joe Cronin, remain very, very adamant about not trading Damian Lillard specifically to the Miami Heat. Now, there is no other teams actively involved, or at least known to the public, that want Damian Lillard, right? There have been teams that have inquired about them. There are teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves that Stephen A. Smith throws out there that it's very unlikely, and even some Portland Trail Blazers beat reporters reported that the Trail Blazers would have zero interest in Karl Anthony Towns. So the question is, if it's not the Miami Heat, what is the situation and what is going to finish up in Portland? Are the Blazers really going to hold on to a top 5 point guard in the league, a top 20 player in the association, a player that has loved playing in Portland but has realized it is time to move on because there is no chance of him winning an NBA championship in Portland? And it makes sense, right? Like, Dame went to the front office. He went to Joe Cronin and specifically said, if you build a competent roster around me filled with veterans, mixed with some young players, that I feel that can win an NBA championship, because let's just face it, the Western Conference isn't the stronger conference anymore. It's the East. When you look at the Knicks, you look at the Bucks, the Celtics, the Heat, the Sixers, that conference is much more competitive and much more top-heavy than the West. Sure, you have the defending champion Denver Nuggets, but it's not like we're going to sit here and act like the Lakers are going to do what they did last year. We're not going to sit here and say the Warriors are going to bounce back. They could, but they are not the same Warriors they used to be. So if you're Damian Lillard, you're looking at the landscape of the NBA and realizing that my roster in Portland isn't good enough. And if they could build a roster in Portland, it would be easier to win with the Blazers because of how light the Western Conference is. And yet Cronin in the Blazers front office elected to do absolutely nothing to help the Blazers get a good roster around Damian Lillard to win right now. Dame is coming off one of his best seasons of his career. He only played in 57 games, but he averaged 32.2 points per night, dished out almost 8 assists on a nightly basis, and shot 37% from 3 and mid 40% from the field. So Damian Lillard is coming off one of his best offensive seasons in his long career. And he's a 33-year-old player, so he's been around the league, been on a lot of bad Trailblazers team, been on a lot of good Trailblazers team. And he has realized that it's not going to happen. And when the Blazers draft Scoot Henderson at number 3 overall, they draft Chris Murray at 23. And the really only good move or only big move they made to this roster throughout free agency and throughout the trade market is re-signing Jerami Grant to a contract that many deem a little overzealous for a player of his caliber. So Damian Lillard has every right to ask out because Portland is not surrounding him with a roster he deems good enough to win a championship in the Western Conference, which theoretically should be the easier conference to get in the finals from. I know you'd have to go through the Denver Nuggets, but it beats trying to have to go through Miami, Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, and New York. You really only have one big honcho in the Western Conference because until the Sacramento Kings prove they can be a threat in the postseason, it's still the old Lakers, the old Warriors. You got the Suns, but it's really Nuggets, Suns, and then that third team in the Western Conference is really up for grabs, while in the East, you know what you got in the top 4 or 5. So it makes sense why Damian Lillard would ask out. And obviously, he requested specifically this team right here, the Miami Heat. And I know a lot of people around the association have a problem with that. And I get it. They don't want teams or players having all the power to where they can demand a trade, and not only demand a trade, but also force the destination, because it ultimately leads to a lesser return for the team trading away the star than it would if there was an open market, right? Like when you look at the Donovan Mitchell situation, the Jazz did what they thought was best for them, because Miami was interested, the Knicks were interested, but he ultimately went to Cleveland. Why is that? It's because the Jazz felt that the Cavs sent the best offer. Now, they're not good, and when I say they, the Blazers are not going to get that same opportunity with the Miami Heat because there's simply no other competition driving up the Miami Heat price. The Heat can sit back and say, if you're willing to keep Damian Lillard on this roster, you're willing to drag this in the training camp, create an awkward situation, not let the Blazers' young talent bloom. And I'm talking about Simons, Sharp, and Scoot Henderson. 3 guards, or I guess you could say Sharp could play the wing, but you're talking about Scoot, Simons, and Sharp who predominantly handle the ball. You had Damian Lillard in that situation. Which one of them is coming off the bench? Because that's now 4 players if you account for Dame with the 3 young guys. Are you really going to play Simons at the 3, Scoot at the 2? Well, Scoot's natural position is handling the ball being a 1. That's not going to happen with Damian Lillard. So are the Blazers comfortable with bringing Damian Lillard back onto this roster, paying him $50+ million to hinder the ability of their young guys to blossom? Because you're only setting your rebuild back farther. Unless the Blazers seriously think that Damian Lillard, Scoot Henderson, Simons, Sharp, Jerami Grant, and Jusuf Nurkic can win an NBA championship, it makes no sense for the Blazers to keep Damian Lillard going forward. Now, if it's just a matter of pride and not wanting to accept the Miami Heat's offer, that's a different story. But you can negotiate, right? There has been reports that the Heat aren't even getting talked to by Portland. And Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald has also reported that the Blazers remain uninterested in sending Damian Lillard to the Miami Heat. And the question really remains that I'm trying to figure out, you guys are trying to figure out, is it the fact that Portland doesn't want to send him to Miami? Or is it the fact that they don't want to send Dame time anywhere other than have him play in Portland this upcoming season? That's the main question we're asking ourselves. And when you look at what the Heat have assets-wise, as we dive into more of that, I think their package is getting underrated by NBA insiders, by talking heads in the media. I don't think the Heat's package is that bad. And you might come at me and say I'm a little biased. Sure, that can be the case. But when you look at the statistics, the equal value, not by the Blazers, but by all 30 teams in the league, you're getting enough for Dame, right? Like, let's just talk Tyler Herro. Won 6th Man of the Year. Averaged 20 points per game in back-to-back seasons and is only 23 years old. As a number one, as a number two on an offensive team, he might be able to average 25-5 on decent efficiency. Now, is that in Portland? No. And I understand why the Blazers don't want Tyler Herro. It doesn't make sense, right? Like, if you want to stick with Simons, Sharp, and Scoot, which I would do if I was in charge of Portland, I wouldn't want Tyler Herro either. But it seems like there are enough suitors around the league to take Tyler Herro as a third team and facilitate a deal. I'm looking at you, Brooklyn. I'm looking at you, San Antonio. Hell, I'm even looking at you in the Utah Jazz. Those three teams right there, I think, could easily send a first or maybe more for Herro, because when you think of Brooklyn, what do they need on that team? You've got Mikal Bridges. You've got Nick Claxton. You've got Cameron Johnson. But they need a perimeter scorer in the guard spot, and Tyler Herro can be that guy. And don't tell me that a 4 of Mikal as the wing, potentially your 1, Herro as your 2, Cam Johnson as your 3, with your big man defensive player of the year candidate Nick Claxton as your 4th option, does not sound enticing. And then you fill in a point guard spot, maybe Spencer Dinwiddie stays there. That is a very interesting starting lineup that I think could potentially grab a playoff spot in that 7, 8, 9 range. So the Spurs, I think, could be interested in Tyler Herro. They send a first-round pick to Miami, say in 2025. I chose that year specifically because that then unlocks 4 first-round picks Miami can send. As we currently speak, the Heat can only send a 27 and 29 first-round pick to Portland. But if they were to get a 25 from a team like San Antonio, a team like Brooklyn or Utah, now that allows the Heat to send 24, 26, 28, and 30. 4 first-round picks the Heat could send to Portland. So let's say Herro goes to a third team, because he's worth that. He's worth the first-round pick. He is. A player at that age who averages 20 a game, who won 6th Man of the Year, is worth that first-round package. Now you've got 4 first tradable picks. That's pretty damn good. And then you add in swaps the other 3 or 4 years. Now the Blazers would control the Heat's best pick in the next 7 seasons. You're going to sit here and tell me that that is not enticing, along with getting younger players like maybe Nikola Jovic, maybe Jaime Jaquez, maybe Caleb Martin. If you're going to try to look at me in a straight face and tell me that that's not an enticing offer, and you wouldn't want to add that to your already young core of Jeremy Grant, Scoot Henderson, Simons, and Sharp, I think that's just blasphemous to say that that would not be a good kickstart to a rebuild. You just cannot tell me that it's not. Because when you look at players like Jaime Jaquez Jr., the 18th selection in the 2023 NBA draft, he was the number 1 guy at UCLA the past couple seasons, averaging 15 plus a night, shooting 48% from the field. He shot really well from 3 last year. It went down this year, but it's because his volume increased. And I would expect in the NBA, when his volume from 3 decreases, and he's taking more open catch and shoot threes, that number would jump up from that 31, 32% it was his senior year at UCLA. And I think it would get closer to the 35, 36, 37% range that you look for is in an NBA role player in today's game. Like, Jaquez is worth a first-round pick. Obviously, he was just taken 18th overall, so I don't really have to try to convince you that he is worth the first-round pick that teams that would look like, right? Let's say the Heat get crazy and send Nikola Jovic too. The 27th pick 2 years ago. He's worth a first-round pick then. I think his stock is only improved, and I really do mean that. If you saw what he did in the G League and what you saw him do in this past summer league in 2023, and then what he is doing right now with the Serbian national team during the FIBA World Cup, I think if you knew all that, right? Just take it back. You know that what you've seen over the past year and a half since he's been drafted, and you plopped him into this 2023 NBA draft, I guarantee he would have been selected above Jaime Jaquez. I'm willing to sit here and say he would have been a top 17th selection, no doubt in my mind. So then now you think of Jaquez, a first-round pick value. Nikola Jovic, a first-round pick value. Don't forget that I just mentioned if you trade Herro to a third team, you now have 4 first-round picks. So that is 6 first-round picks in value before you get to pick swaps, which if you're talking pick swaps and you think about the Blazers controlling those draft selections of which one's better, that is now 9. 9 first-round picks that the Blazers would get from the Miami Heat. And then you throw in salary filler like Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, who Robinson, not talked about enough, is actually a better value than most people think. And I want to dive in on Duncan Robinson for a quick second. If you really think, outside of the play-in game against Chicago, who got a better postseason, Max Strus or Duncan Robinson? I think the answer is Duncan Robinson because what Duncan did in Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals, what he did in Game 2 of the NBA Finals in Denver, they were unbelievable performances. Duncan Robinson even cooked Drew Holiday a little bit in the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round. So Duncan Robinson, which we thought was a negative asset, has 3 years, $18 million left per season on that deal. What did Max Strus just get in free agency in the signing trade? A 4-year, $64 million deal. That comes out to $16 million a year. So are you trying to tell me that Max Strus is looked at as a value shooting signing in free agency by the Cavs at $16 million a year over 4? But Duncan Robinson, who is getting paid $18 million a year with 3 years left on his deal, so $2 million plus a year more than Strus, 1 less year, and that's a negative asset, I'd argue Duncan Robinson is a better shooter. I know he had a down year. But if you just look at face value in a vacuum, what they've done in their career, Duncan Robinson is no doubt a better shooter than Max Strus. And you can say Strus is a little bit of a better defender. I would tend to agree with you. But it's not enough to offset what I believe the shooting difference is in favor of Duncan Robinson. So I think Robinson has a better contract. He's got a better value in the NBA than Max Strus. I appreciate everything Max Strus did for the Miami Heat. But I think he is not as highly valued as Duncan Robinson is. And I think the NBA overrates Max Strus as a whole. So I think that is a decent value the Blazers get, right? I don't think it's that bad at all. And then you think about maybe a Caleb Martin getting thrown in there. I doubt that if the Heat traded both Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic, the Blazers would get Caleb Martin, but just say hypothetically, you do want to send off Martin, who's got one of the best contracts in the association, about 2 years left on his deal, 6.5 on each year. It's one of the best deals in the NBA. He is no doubt worth a first-round pick. When you think of players like Bruce Brown getting 20 plus mil a year, Josh Hart getting 20 mil a year, do I think that those two players I just mentioned are 14 mil a season better than Caleb Martin? Hell no. Caleb Martin's one of the best contracts in the NBA, and he is worth a first-round pick. So if the Blazers asked for the mother load, and you added Caleb Martin amongst the other things I mentioned, the Blazers are getting an equivalent of double-digit, 10, 11 first-round picks. And you're telling me the assets for the Miami Heat aren't good enough to acquire a 33-year-old point guard that asked out of a team that isn't in a spot to win a championship? You cannot look at me in the eyes and tell me that the Blazers would be getting robbed. They wouldn't. They would be getting a fair return for Damian Lillard if the Heat sent everything. And I get that the Heat probably won't send everything. But the Blazers can ask. They're not even sitting down at the table. Cronin and Pat Riley aren't talking. If you're telling me that the Blazers aren't talking and negotiating because the Heat are sending bullshit, you're wrong. You're just wrong. So you can't look at me with a dead straight face and tell me the Heat assets aren't good enough to get Damian Lillard, because they are. And now that brings me to my next point, is like, what would I offer for Damian Lillard? And I kind of wrote it down a little bit. I looked at the Heat roster, look at some of the exceptions, right? So I think the most logical trade offer for Damian Lillard is Herro goes to a third team. I'm going to pick Brooklyn because I think that's the most logical choice. They send a first-round pick back to Miami, 25. It unlocks 24, 26, 28, and 30, like I mentioned. Now the Heat are sending 4 first-round picks to Portland. They're sending Jaime Jaquez Jr. They're sending Duncan Robinson. They're sending Kyle Lowry. So you've got the salary matching players in Lowry and Duncan. You've got the young player in Jaime Jaquez Jr. And you've got 4 first-round picks unprotected, as well as 3 pick swaps in 25, 27, and 30. Sorry about that. That's what my trade offer. And I think that's a fair offer, man. Like, at this stage of the game, like I mentioned earlier in today's video / podcast style, I don't think the Blazers would want to bring in Damian Lillard in a training camp, because why would they want to ruin their own team chemistry? Why would they want to ruin the development of the number 3 overall pick, Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, who is a very promising player, and then Shaedon Sharpe, who was a lottery pick last year? It doesn't make any sense. So that trade offer I just mentioned, I think is very, very fair. And now, would the Blazers accept it? It seems to be very up in the air if they would be interested in that. But to me, there is no reason why they should not be interested in that trade. But my real next point that I want to get to in today's video is it worth it? Is it worth gutting your roster to a point where if you make that deal, you're sitting at, let's see here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roster spots available. Which means you're only rostering 10 guys, 9 guys. Let me see. Yeah. So you're going to have a lot of vet min guys filling out that roster. And you're not going to have a lot of depth in the regular season. But when you look at a team that is comprised of Damian Lillard, Nikola Jovic still there, Josh Richardson, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. You're still going to have Caleb Martin in my trade offer. You're still going to have Kevin Love, Orlando Robinson, Thomas Bryant. Think that team would win it all, man. Like, I don't know how many times I have to come out and say it. But when you think about Damian Lillard running a pick and roll with Bam Adebayo, and you've got Jimmy Butler playing off-ball, cutting baseline, dive cutting behind defenders while they rotate to Bam on a slip screen, or they double the ball when Damian Lillard's coming off a screen, and then he pocket passes it to Bam. Bam, who is a very willing passer, is now either left with a choice where he can go up for a dunk, a mid-range, kick it out to Jimmy, maybe kick it to a Jimmy cutting baseline, or that 5th guy in the rotation who is sitting wide open, standing at the 3-point line. The Heat offense with that trio would fit so perfectly. I think it would be the best team in the NBA. And sure, the depth is concerning, but that is only concerning if there are injuries. And I don't want to predict injuries. Obviously, Jimmy's going to play probably between 58 and 65 games a year, just because of his age and load management. I expect Damian Lillard to only play between 58 and 65 games. Bam will play more, assuming he doesn't get seriously injured, because he's younger. But if you stagger the times Damian Lillard sits and Jimmy Butler sits, you're still going to get a lot of good basketball from your Miami Heat, to where would they finish 65 and 17? Probably not. But would they finish 58 and 24? I say yes. So in that point, then the Heat get a top 2-3 seed in the NBA, and they've got home court advantage, which we know in this past postseason was very, very good at the Kaseya Center, newly named Kaseya Center, for your Miami Heat. So if they're able to have home court advantage throughout the postseason in the Eastern Conference with Dame, Jimmy, and Bam, who have all had signature playoff moments, signature playoff games, who are known for rising to the occasion when the lights are brightest, there is no doubt in my mind that trade would be worth it, and the Heat would win the NBA title. I know I've harped on this same point a lot, so I'm not going to keep doing it. But I do think the Heat would be able to win the championship. Not with ease. It would be a battle because they'd have to figure out rotations. They'd figure out their defense. But when you look strictly at their offensive ability, in the flow of their offense, and an Eric Spoelstra-led team with Nikola Jovic coming off the bench, Josh Richardson, Caleb Martin, that team is so, so good and would be able to win the NBA title, no doubt about it. And I mentioned to you guys that the Heat roster would have 5 open spots if my trade package that I proposed earlier in the show did end up happening. Who could be the surrounding players that they have? Well, thanks to Greg Sylvander. Wow, sorry, Greg. Thanks to Greg Sylvander of 5 Reasons Sports Network, we have an idea of some of the players that he could target, right? And Christian Wood is one of them. Kelly Oubre is another. And Svi Mykhailiuk is another that he mentioned very recently. And when you look at this roster and think about what is going out, Tyler Herro is going out. Jaime Jaquez is going out. Duncan Robinson's going out. Kyle Lowry's going out. Dame's coming in. So what does that mean? You're now going to have 1, 2, 3 players you're able to sign just to match the 4 players going out. And if you match those 4 players coming out, you're now sitting at 13 roster spots, which means you have 2 more available when you have 15 complete guys. And remember this year that two-way players are now 3. And the current two-way players signed in the Miami Heat are guard Jamaree Bouyea, guard/forward Jamal Cain, and guard Drew Smith. So let's just say this. You have 5 roster spots you can fill after trading for Damian Lillard. I'm going to mark Jamaree Bouyea and Jamal Cain moving from a two-way contract to a standard contract. So now that allows you to add 3 more guys to your roster. You have 10-day/training camp contracts with Justin Champagnie, Cole Swider, Caleb Daniels, Drew Peterson, and Alondes Williams. So let's just hypothetically here go with Cole Swider and Drew Peterson as your two-way replacements for Jamaree Bouyea and Jamal Cain. So that's how you take care of that roster spot. And now you have 3 normal roster spots available. I think I would sign Christian Wood over Kelly Oubre. And Kelly Oubre did average 20.3 points per game this past season, shooting 43% from the field, but 31.9% from 3. But he was also playing for the Charlotte Hornets, a team that was very, very bad, who had the number 2 overall pick in this past year's draft. So when you think about Oubre's role on the Miami Heat, it is not going to be a guy who chucks up a lot of shots and is able to put up 20 points a game. His volume would decrease a lot, so his efficiency would have to go up for him to be effective. Would he be able to average 10, 12 points off the bench? There's no doubt in my mind. And he could be the leading scorer off the bench that the Heat would want. But I think I would lean Christian Wood. And I know you have Thomas Bryant and Orlando Robinson already, but what Christian Wood brings that Bryant and Robinson don't is consistent shooting from the perimeter. Christian Wood shot 37.6% from 3 this past season, and he shot above 35% from deep over the last 4 seasons almost every single year. And what he is going to do for you offensively outweighs his negative impact on the defensive side. You slot Christian Wood into the power forward position, which he can play. And now your front court is Bam, Christian Wood, and Jimmy Butler in that specific rotation. You've got the blend of size, because you've got 2 6'11 plus guys, 6'10 plus guys, I should say, in Bam and Christian Wood. You have a guy who can space the floor and shoot in Christian Wood. You have the defensive impact between Jimmy and Bam. And we know those two can work so good together because they've been to 3 Eastern Conference Finals and 2 NBA Finals since teaming up in 2019-2020. So I think that front court would work really well, and it would work much better than a lineup is comprised of Kelly Oubre, Jimmy Butler, and Bam. Why? Because Oubre struggles with his three-point shot, and he really isn't efficient whatsoever from beyond the arc. So I think I would lean Christian Wood over Kelly Oubre. Now, I brought up Svi Mykhailiuk, and that one intrigues me a lot. And you might ask yourself, why? And he's not the best player, but he is a sharpshooter from beyond the arc. I think he can shoot 38% from 3, and say you're trading Duncan Robinson in that Damian Lillard deal. What is one thing the Heat are lacking last season? They were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league, but then now you've lost Duncan Robinson, Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent in these deals. So now you have to replenish your shooting. Obviously, Damian Lillard coming back would be a massive shooter. Potentially add Christian Wood, like I mentioned. Svi Mykhailiuk could be the 11th, 12th guy in this roster that his only role is to come off the bench and hit three-point shots as the 5th guy in a lineup. And another person that I think needs to be talked about in the trade market, and this is a trade market, so this could be another trade for the Miami Heat, and it's Landry Shamet. And because when you think about what the Heat roster would need post-Damian Lillard trade, and it's the backup point guard position. Landry Shamet, to me, would be the perfect backup point guard who can provide shooting, intangibles, defense, and playmaking for your Miami Heat off the bench. And why it intrigues me, and because I think the Heat have trade exceptions that fill this requirement. And you can't package trade exceptions together to make one mega exception. But what they did do is when they traded Victor Oladipo to the Oklahoma City Thunder, they received a trade exception of $9.45 million. So when you think about the Wizards holding on to Landry Shamet, they're going to be really bad. So what is the point of holding on to Landry Shamet? The Heat could send that Oladipo trade exception of $9.45 million to the Washington Wizards alongside a couple second-round picks because the Heat do have the Lakers' second-round pick in 26 and they have a second-round pick swap in 27. So if you send those two second-round picks plus the Oladipo trade exception, I think that gets it done for Landry Shamet, and that would fill out your roster. You'd have your backup point guard. Your third point guard would be Jaime Jaquez, and now you're looking at a Heat roster that is comprised of Damian Lillard, Josh Richardson, Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jovic, Bam Adebayo, Caleb Martin, Thomas Bryant, Haywood Highsmith, Kevin Love, Nikola Jovic, Orlando Robinson, and then in this hypothetical situation, you have CV Mikhailuk, Christian Wood, Jaime Jaquez, Jamal Cain, and Landry Shamet. That's a pretty fucking good 15-man roster if you're the Miami Heat. So I absolutely think that could happen. And I think those 4 or 5 players that I mentioned that could be signees of the Miami Heat, if a Damian Lillard deal gets done, would absolutely happen. I know this is a very long show, long episode, 32 minutes. I wanted to try something different where I just spoke for a very long time about the Miami Heat and what is going around the 305 at this time in the NBA offseason, where we're a month and a half away from training camp and trade talks have been dead. But as a little present, I should say I want to talk a little bit about Anthony Edwards to end our show today. And Edwards has been saying some interesting stuff regarding the Miami Heat and Erik Spoelstra while playing for Team USA because, as you guys know, Spoelstra is an assistant coach on the FIBA national team where Jalen Brunson and Anthony Edwards are the headliners overseas where USA is going for the gold. And we've seen on Heat Twitter that Erik Spoelstra and Anthony Edwards has been spending a lot of time together. And with that being said, Anthony Edwards also said today that Heat culture is no joke, and he sees the passion, the energy, the intensity that Erik Spoelstra brings to Team USA practices, and know it's the same way for the Miami Heat. Now, obviously, there could be some seeds being planted by Erik Spoelstra on Anthony Edwards for the near future. But let's just be real here. No Anthony Edwards to the Miami Heat that's not a real possibility in the next 2 to 3 seasons, 4 to 5 seasons, that is very doable, and it really does pique my interest. When you think of what is left on Jimmy Butler's contract, on Damian Lillard's contract, both 3 years. They're both older players. They're both 33, 34. You're telling me if Dame doesn't come to Miami via trade, the Heat win 2 of the next 3 championships, which I know is very overzealous and very unlikely. But you're telling me that if they win 2 to 3 championships in the next 3 to 4 seasons, they wouldn't retire at the highest point possible. And if they do, the Heat would be looking for the next co-star alongside Bam Adebayo. Could it be Anthony Edwards via a trade? Because you'd think the Heat would have replenished some draft picks in that long-term future by the time after the Damian Lillard trade. So if they do that, Anthony Edwards, I think, is a very MVP caliber player. He is being compared to Dwayne Wade right now, the way they play. And honestly, I wouldn't say it's realistic, but I would say it's not the most unbelievable thing I've ever heard. He is very good at attacking the cup. He's got that dog mentality. He's very athletic. He's not the best from beyond the arc, but he's getting better. Anthony Edwards and Bam Adebayo would be an unbelievable duo. And when you think of that potential duo, you're thinking of a Bam Adebayo who's 28, 29, 30 maybe, entering his prime. He's a veteran. He's very, very established in this league. And then Anthony Edwards be entering his prime at 26, 27. I think it would be one of the best duos in the NBA at that time. It's hard to project 4 to 5 years down the line, but Anthony Edwards to the 305, being a Heatle in 4 to 5 seasons, does pique my interest quite a bit, and I would love to see that be a realistic possibility down the road. That's going to do it for today's Heat Report. We're near 37 minutes long on this episode. Sorry for taking so much of your time, but if you guys did make it throughout the end of the episode, I want you guys to let me know. And the only way I'm going to know that you stayed throughout the episode is if you go on YouTube and comment 305 down in the comment section. And if you do that, I will know you are the realest of the reals. I will know you are an OG, a Heat Report legend. So if you comment and see what I'm talking about right now, comment 305. I'll know you're a real one. And I will appreciate you guys sticking around for my TED Talk that is damn near 37 minutes long. But that is everything surrounding the Miami Heat I wanted to get off my chest as we speak. We're going to do more in-depth conversations about Oubre, about Christian Wood, about Svi Mykhailiuk. Coming up, more in-depth player pieces, but this was an overall macro view on what is happening with the Miami Heat. I appreciate everyone involved, listening. I love doing this. It makes me so happy to do this for you guys every day, so I hope you enjoy it. Go Heat. Make sure you subscribe to the Heat Report, and if you see it, type 305 in the comment section.